He opened a forbidden door in the palace. What came out terrified the entire kingdom. The wind howled across the palace towers that night. It was not the soft wind of spring dot. It was a cold, restless wind that made the torches flicker and the long curtains whisper like frightened ghosts. Elias felt it even before he heard the sound. A faint knocking. Tap. 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 He froze. The palace was supposed to be asleep. Servants slept in the lower halls. Guards stood quietly in the outer courts. The king rested in his golden chambers. No one should be walking these halls at this hour. Especially not near that corridor. Elias held his lantern tighter. The light shook slightly in his hand. It's just the wind, he whispered to himself. But deep inside, he knew the truth. The wind never knocked. Elias had worked in the royal palace for almost 10 years. He was not a knight or a nobleman. He was only a caretaker. His job was simple: keep the halls clean, replace burnt torches, and check that every door was locked for the night. Most people ignored him. Servants nodded politely. Guards barely looked at him. Nobles walked past him as if he were part of the war. But Elias did not mind. He preferred quiet. The palace held too many secrets. And secrets often brought trouble. The kingdom of Valenford was large and powerful. Tall white walls surrounded the city. Golden banners waved above every tower. From the outside, the palace looked peaceful. But inside, there was one place everyone avoided. The west corridor. Even the bravest guards did not like walking there at night. Because at the end of that corridor stood a door. A door that had not been opened for 100 years. The forbidden door. Elias first heard about it when he was a young servant. An old guard named Martin had told him the story one winter night. They had been sitting near the kitchen fire. Listen carefully, Martin said quietly. Some doors exist for a reason. And some doors must never be opened. Elias leaned closer. What door? He asked. Martin looked toward the dark hallway. The one in the west corridor. Elias laughed. A door. Martin did not smile. Young man, that door once destroyed half this kingdom. The fire cracked loudly. Elias felt a strange chill. What happened? Martin shook his head slowly. No one truly knows. Only this: a king opened that door long ago, and something came out. What? Martin stared into the flames. Something that should never have existed. After that night, Elias always avoided the west corridor. If his work required him to pass nearby, he walked quickly. He never looked toward the door. But tonight was different. Tonight the knocking came from that direction. Tap. 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 Elias swallowed. He should walk away. He should return to the servant quarters. But something strange pulled him forward. Curiosity. The same dangerous curiosity that had ruined many lives. The corridor was darker than the rest of the palace. Only 2 torches burned along the long stone wall. Their light barely touched the floor. Elias walked slowly. His footsteps echoed softly. The knocking grew louder. Tap. 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 It was definitely coming from the door. His heart began to race. No one is there, he whispered. But the sound continued. At the end of the corridor stood the forbidden door. It was larger than a normal door. Old iron bands crossed its surface. Strange carvings covered the wood. Symbols no one in the palace could read anymore. Dust lay thick around the frame. No one had touched it in decades. But tonight something had changed. The knocking stopped. The corridor became silent. Too silent. Elias lifted his lantern. The light revealed something that made his stomach tighten. The heavy iron lock on the door was shaking. Just slightly. As if something behind the door was moving. Elias stepped backward. His first thought was simple. Run. Leave the corridor. Tell the guards. But another thought came quickly. What if someone was trapped inside? What if the door had been sealed by mistake long ago? What if someone needed help? His breathing grew fast. His mind argued with itself. Open it. Don't open it. Open it. Don't open it. Then something whispered. Very softly. Help me. Elias froze. His skin turned cold. The voice came from the other side of the door. It sounded weak. Like someone trapped for years. Please, the voice whispered again. Elias stared at the door. His heart pounded harder. No one could survive in there, he whispered. But the voice sounded real. And human. He slowly stepped closer. Who are you? He asked. Silence. Then a faint reply. A prisoner. Elias looked around the empty corridor. No guards. No servants. Only him. And the door. He knew the rules. Everyone in the palace knew the rules. The forbidden door must never be opened. But the voice sounded desperate. And Elias had always been a kind man. Slowly, carefully, he reached toward the lock. His hand trembled. The iron felt cold as ice. Please, the voice whispered again. Elias closed his eyes. Just one look. Just enough to see if someone truly needed help. Nothing more. He pulled the keyring from his belt. The palace had many master keys. One of them fit the ancient lock. The metal clicked loudly. Elias held his breath. The lock slowly opened. The door creaked as he pushed it. Darkness waited behind it. Deep. Endless. His lantern light barely entered the room. The air that came out was cold. And old. Like a tomb that had been sealed for centuries. Elias stepped forward slightly. Hello, he called. No answer. Then something moved inside the darkness. Something tall. Something wrong. Elias raised the lantern higher. The light revealed a shape slowly rising from the floor. A thin figure. Too thin. Its skin looked gray. Its eyes opened. And when Elias saw them, his blood froze. Because the eyes were not human. They were completely black. The creature smiled slowly. You opened the door, it said softly. Elias stepped back in terror. What are you? The creature's smile grew wider. I am freedom. The lantern fell from Elias's hand. The flame went out. And the darkness inside the room began to spread. Slowly. Hungrily. Into the palace. And in that moment, Elias realized something terrible. The door had not been built to keep someone inside. It had been built to keep something from escaping. And now, it was free. The palace trembled as a chilling whisper echoed through the halls. You have opened the door, and the kingdom will never be the same again. But the worst part. What came out of that room was only the beginning. If you want to discover what happens next, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any part of this terrifying story. Because in next part of this story, the darkness begins to spread through the palace, and the kingdom will face a horror no one is prepared for. The darkness moved. At first, Elias thought it was only his fear playing tricks on his eyes. But then he saw it clearly. The black mist crawling out of the forbidden room was alive. It slid across the floor like thick smoke, rising slowly against the stone walls of the corridor. The air grew colder with every second. Elias stumbled backward, his hands shaking. What are you? He whispered. Inside the room, the tall grey creature stepped forward. Its long arms hung loosely by its sides. Its black eyes shone in the darkness like two empty holes. The creature smiled again. You already know, it said calmly. Elias shook his head in panic. No, this can't be real. The creature tilted its head. Oh, it is very real, it replied softly. And thanks to you, I am finally free. The dark mist behind it continued to pour out of the forbidden chamber, spreading deeper into the palace. Elias turned and ran. His footsteps echoed loudly as he raced down the corridor. His heart pounded so hard he could barely breathe. Guards. He needed to find the guards. The palace guard post was only 2 hallways away. If he could warn them, maybe they could stop whatever had escaped. But as he turned the corner, he froze. The darkness had already reached the hallway ahead. It slid across the floor like a living shadow. And something moved inside it. Shapes. Tall shapes. Walking slowly. Elias backed away. His voice trembled. "Who's there?" One of the shapes stepped forward into the torchlight. It was a guard. But something was wrong. The guard's armor was still on his body, but his face looked pale and empty. His eyes were completely black. Just like the creatures. The guard's mouth opened slowly. "Join us." Elias screamed and ran the other direction. Meanwhile, deep inside the palace, King Aldrich suddenly woke up. The old king sat up in his bed, breathing heavily. He had felt it. A terrible cold spreading through the palace. For years he had feared this moment. And now it had finally come. The king stepped out of his bed and walked to the tall window. Outside, the moon shone over the quiet kingdom. But something was wrong. Dark clouds were gathering over the palace towers. King Aldrich closed his eyes. "The door," he whispered. Someone had opened it. Far below the royal chambers, Elias ran through the servants' halls. He burst into the kitchen. Several servants jumped in surprise. "Elias." "What's wrong?" one woman asked. Elias grabbed the table, gasping for breath. The door, the forbidden door. The room grew quiet. Everyone stared at him. "You didn't," the cook said slowly. Elias nodded weakly. "I opened it." The room exploded with panic. "You what? Are you insane? That door is cursed." Before Elias could explain more, the torches on the wall suddenly flickered. Then they went out. The kitchen fell into darkness. A cold wind rushed through the room. And from the hallway outside, a soft whisper drifted in. "Join us." One of the servants began to cry. The cook grabbed the knife. "What is that?" someone whispered. Elias already knew. "It's here." The kitchen door slowly creaked open. Dark mist rolled across the floor. And several figures stepped inside. The palace guards. But their eyes were black. And their faces showed no life. The cook raised the knife. "Stay back." One of the guards tilted his head. Then he rushed forward with terrifying speed. Chaos exploded in the kitchen. Servants screamed. Tables crashed. Elias grabbed the metal pan and swung it at the nearest guard. The pan struck the guard's helmet with a loud clang. But the guard didn't stop. It kept moving forward like a machine. Elias felt fear tighten in his chest. These were not normal people anymore. Something else was controlling them. Then the whisper came again. But this time it echoed everywhere. Walls. Ceiling. Floor. "We are rising." The grey creature stepped into the kitchen. Every servant froze. It looked around calmly. "So many new hosts," it said with quiet pleasure. Elias stared at it in horror. "What do you want?" The creature smiled. "What I have waited 100 years for." "And what is that?" Elias shouted. The creature's black eyes shone. "A kingdom." High above the chaos, King Aldrich entered the royal war chamber. A single torch burned on the wall. Inside the room stood an ancient stone chest. The king slowly opened it. Inside lay an old silver sword covered in strange symbols. The king lifted it carefully. His voice was heavy with regret. "I prayed this day would never come." The door behind him opened suddenly. Captain Rowan of the Royal Guard stepped inside. "My king," Rowan said urgently. "Something terrible is happening in the palace." The king nodded slowly. I know. Rowan looked confused. You know? The king sighed deeply. That door was never meant to be opened again. What door? The forbidden door in the west corridor. Elias looked at him. What does it mean? The king struggled to stand. His voice was heavy. The door was sealed 100 years ago using a powerful ritual. Elias swallowed. And the person who opened it must be the one to close it. Elias's heart pounded. How? The king looked toward the dark corridor. By entering the chamber again. The room fell silent. Elias understood immediately. If I go inside. The king nodded slowly. You can trap it again. Elias looked at the creature. And if I fail? The creature answered calmly. Then I will finally be free to take the entire kingdom. The darkness surged again. The creature's army was growing stronger. More guards were rising from the floor under its control. King Aldrich placed a hand on Elias's shoulder. I will not ask this of you, the king said quietly. But Elias already knew the truth. No one else could do it. This was his mistake. And now it was his responsibility. Elias took a deep breath. I'll do it. The creature laughed. You are brave? Elias stared back at it. No, he said. I'm guilty. The king handed him the glowing silver sword. You will need this. Elias took the weapon. It felt heavy in his hands. But the glow gave him courage. The creature stepped aside. Go, it said. Elias ran. The palace corridors were filled with darkness now. Shadows crawled across the walls. Strange whispers filled the air. But Elias kept running. Past the silent guards. Past the empty halls. Until he reached the west corridor again. The forbidden door stood open. Waiting. The dark chamber inside looked deeper than before. Like a hole in the world. Elias held the glowing sword tightly. All right, he whispered. Let's finish this. He stepped inside. The chamber was colder than ice. The walls were covered in ancient symbols. At the center of the room stood a circle carved into the stone floor. Elias remembered the king's words. The ritual. He stepped into the circle. The silver sword began glowing brighter. The darkness behind him rushed forward. The creature appeared at the doorway. Its smile had returned. You are making a mistake. Elias shook his head. No. You think you can trap me again? I know I can. The creature stepped closer. But you will be trapped too. Elias looked at the glowing symbols on the floor. He understood now. The door had not only been a prison. It had been a sacrifice. Someone had stayed behind to seal the creature the first time. And now, it would happen again. Elias raised the sword. Goodbye. The creature suddenly rushed forward. No. But it was too late. Elias drove the sword into the center of the circle. The symbols exploded with light. The chamber shook violently. A powerful wind pulled the darkness back toward the center. The creature screamed in fury. No. I will not return. But the magic was stronger. The dark mist twisted like a storm. The creature's body began breaking apart into shadow. It reached toward Elias desperately. You will die here. Elias nodded calmly. I know. The light became blinding. The door slowly closed. The creature's scream faded into silence. And then, everything stopped. The palace was quiet again. The darkness vanished. The possessed guard slowly woke up. Confused. Alive. King Aldrich stood in the west corridor. The forbidden door was sealed once more. But Elias was gone. The king lowered his head sadly. He saved us all. Years later, the kingdom built a statue in the palace garden. A statue of a simple caretaker holding a sword. People told the story to their children. The story of the man who opened the forbidden door and then gave his life to close it again. But sometimes, late at night, the guards in the west corridor say they hear something. A faint knock coming from the other side of the door. Tap, tap, tap. And they pray no one is foolish enough to open it again. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who loves suspense and horror tales. Because here on this channel, every story hides a secret, and the next one might be even more terrifying.